In this video, we're turning apples into high-proof alcohol, otherwise known as apple brandy. This is actually a pretty simple process, but if you screw it up, what you make can not only taste bad, but it can also be dangerous. So if you want to make your own apple brandy and do it right, you're going to want to watch the entire video. Let's get started. Here's what you're going to need: a fruit mill, a large fermenter, apples, apple juice, and yeast. You can use a ton of apples or some apple juice, or a combination of both, which is what we're going to do. You also need a still. We're using an 8-gallon stainless steel model. You can find a link to that in the description. And you also need some people to hang out with, because making booze is always more fun with friends. Speaking of, we're joined by master distiller Jesse from Still It and mead expert Charlie from Golden Hive Mead. Let's get started. Step 1, buy some apples. We made sure to get a nice blend of apples to better balance the flavor and acidity. Step 2, mill your apples. As you can see, our fruit mill wasn't in the best shape. We tried to solder it, but we didn't have the right solder and flux, and after many failed attempts, blue painter's tape did the trick. An optional step 3 is to press the apples. We actually recommend doing this, but we didn't have a press when we were making our brandy. If you're following along and doing this at home, you'll probably want to press as well. Step 4, add the apple juice. We milled the apples right into our fermenter, so all we had to do was dump the apple juice right on top. We split 3 whole bags of apples and around 6.5, give or take, gallons of apple juice into 2 buckets. Step 5, add more additional sugar. We're using honey, and I'll explain why in a second, but you'll need to do this because there won't be enough sugar in the apples alone. In fact, if we fermented just the apples and juice alone, we'd have made a wash that was only about 5% ABV. When distilling, you generally want to start with a wash that is more in the range of 10% ABV, so we effectively need to double the sugar content. And to do so, we added a bunch of honey. Sugar would have been a lot cheaper, but since we were joined by a world-renowned mead expert, we had to use honey. Step 6, add yeast and yeast nutrients. We use K1-V1116 yeast because it's a strong, reliable fermenter that handles high alcohol levels and brings out fruity flavors. We also added 30 grams of yeast nutrient to each bucket to help aid in a healthy fermentation. Step 7, add the lid and airlock to your bucket fermenter and let the waiting begin. After a week, it was time to see how our fermentation went. We fermented all the way down to 1010, which simply means that most of the sugars have been converted into alcohol, maximizing the yield. Sheesh! Look at them apples. Just look at them. We had to separate the apples from the liquid, and luckily we had the perfect setup for it. We dumped everything into our 20-gallon brew kettle with the grain basket to strain it. We then opened the ball valve and let the liquid pour into our stainless steel still. We even mashed the apples a bit to try and get as much liquid out as possible. Speaking of the still, our setup today is a reflux configuration. A reflux setup lets some of the water vapor turn back into liquid and drip down through the column. However, alcohol vapor moves on, which increases the strength of the apple brandy. Using these bubble plates is like running distillate through many stills over and over again, and in the end, it produces a higher proof spirit. The wash in the pot might start around 10% ABV, the first plate could be around 50% ABV, and by the second plate, it might reach 70% ABV. So the taller your still, the higher the alcohol content you can get. If you look at our website, you might notice that this particular still comes with 3 plates by default, but for this particular run, we're only using 2 plates. That's because we're making brandy, not vodka. We want this stuff to be strong, but we don't want it to be so strong that all the flavor gets stripped out. If we use 3 plates, it'd be very high proof, but we'd miss out on some of the flavors that a 2-plate still will allow to pass through. This is the beauty of a modular still, as you can set it up in a ton of different configurations to suit your needs. Okay, here's where we start to get into some of the safety stuff I mentioned earlier. Once the still starts producing, the first stuff to drip out of it will potentially contain a chemical compound called methanol. This is also called 4 shots. It comes out first because of all the compounds in a brandy wash, methanol has the lowest boiling temperature. Methanol is poisonous and can make you very sick and even make you go blind. So you're going to want to discard the first 150 to 250 milliliters of liquid that comes out of the still. Absolutely do not drink this stuff. Seriously. Get rid of it. In a distillation run, you have heads, hearts, and tails. If you think about it over time, bad stuff in the beginning, bad stuff at the end, and the good stuff is in the middle. Heads come right after the 4 shots, and they still have some very sharp, burny characteristics that you don't want in your final drink. A common issue when distilling fruit is losing the fruity flavors. Fruity flavors come from light compounds that evaporate early, so they often end up in the heads along with the harsh stuff you usually throw out. To combat this, you can add a sight glass packed with fruit, which which lets the alcohol vapors pass through it, picking up fresh fruit flavors on the way up, adding these aromas and tastes back into your final product. Speaking of vapors, another safety measure is to distill in an open, well-ventilated space. Alcohol vapor is flammable and it can build up quickly, creating a fire or explosion risk. Good airflow keeps you safe by letting those vapors escape. Never leave your still unattended, and always keep a fire extinguisher nearby. More safety tips from our website are linked below. Moving on to hearts. A good sign that you're getting into hearts is when the harsh, sharp smell fades and the vapors start to smell clean, smooth, and slightly sweet. The taste should be smoother too. We notice some sweetness and almost apple pie-like flavors popping out during this time. It's important to note that when making cuts, you need to keep things organized. We use smaller glasses for foreshots, heads, and tails, and once we are certain we are in hearts, we transition to a large glass container. When making cuts, we also lined everything up in order from heads to tails so we didn't get anything mixed up. It's also not a bad idea to label your jars. Tails are the final part of the run, where heavier compounds start to come through and the alcohol takes on dull, bitter notes, sometimes even a damp, cardboard-like taste. This is where you can get creative and follow your own taste. As we got into the tails, the flavor reminded us of biting too deep into an apple and hitting the core. Definitely different, but kind of interesting. We set aside our large, safe hearts glass and let it drip a little bit longer into a separate glass, just to see if we liked where the run was headed without contaminating our hearts. Once we officially called the run, it was time to start proofing it down. That's simply when you add water to your final spirit to bring the alcohol level down to where you want it for drinking, bottling, or barreling. We poured our selected hearts into a larger container and went back to taste a few of our collected jars that we had set aside, ones that we thought might be worth adding based on flavor and mouthfeel. One had a nice tart green apple note that really stood out, so we decided to include that with the hearts. The rest didn't hit the mark, so we left them all out. That's the beauty of a safe cut and starting to collect in smaller jars. You don't have to worry about contaminating your final product, but you still have the advantage of potentially getting some great flavors. We checked the proof of our hearts and it came in right on target at 85% ABV. Next, we measured the volume so we could do the math and figure out exactly how much water to add to reach our desired final ABV. Jesse's website has a super handy calculator. Just plug in your starting ABV, liquid volume, and target ABV. Hit enter, and it tells you exactly how much water to add. We were aiming for 40% ABV, which meant we needed to add 3.8 cups of water to our hearts. We mixed it all together and ended up with an awesome final product. The honey and apples were very well balanced, and it had a great mouthfeel. The aroma was excellent, and the alcohol presence was mellow. We want to thank Jesse and Charlie again for a great time together in New Zealand. All of our websites are linked below. Until the next one, cheers. Oh, you alright? Fuck.
And I guess it was hot.